Your brain isn't dying from old age. It is silently starving to death. Conventional medicine calls Alzheimer's an irreversible death sentence. They are lying. Uncover the terrifying truth about type 3 diabetes and the radical secret that can actually resurrect a shattered mind. Have you ever looked deeply into the familiar eyes of someone who has loved you since the day you took your first breath, only to see an echoing, terrifying emptiness staring back? It is a specific kind of living death. It is the moment you realize that the person sitting right in front of you is desperately, frantically searching their own shattered mind to remember who you are. We have all felt that cold, breathless panic when a parent or a spouse looks around a living room they've inhabited for 30 years, utterly lost. It is a profound, suffocating helplessness. And let us be brutally honest with ourselves. It is the exact same quiet terror that grips your own throat when you forget a name, or stare blankly at your car keys, and a dark whisper echoes in your mind asking, "Is this it? Is this how my mind begins to rot?" Canada Senior Health Guide 04 warmly welcomes you to a revelation that will shatter everything you thought you knew about aging. If you want to uncover the hidden truths about your health and protect the minds of the people you love, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel right now. Your support is the vital heartbeat that empowers us to keep bringing you these life-saving, deeply researched videos. For decades, I sat paralyzed on the wrong side of the medical desk, watching this exact nightmare play out like a cruel, unending movie. I am haunted by a specific, rainy afternoon with a man named Arthur. Arthur was a master architect of steel and concrete, a retired engineer whose brilliant mind had once calculated the load-bearing tension of massive suspension bridges. Yet, on that afternoon, this titan of intellect sat trembling in my office, clutching his weeping daughter's hand, looking as fragile and frightened as a lost toddler because he could no longer figure out how to loop the laces of his own shoes. The conventional medical machine had already chewed him up and spat out its devastating boilerplate verdict. In a sterile, blindingly white room, a specialist had handed him the standard script. "It's Alzheimer's. It is your genetics. There is absolutely nothing we can do to stop this decay. Take this pill to mask the symptoms for a few fleeting months and go home to plan your funeral." It was a clinical, icy death sentence delivered with zero empathy. The implicit, unspoken command from modern medicine was absolutely sickening. Surrender. Just sit quietly in the waiting room of your life until your memories turn to ash. As Arthur's daughter sobbed into her hands, a fierce, raging rebellion detonated inside my chest. I violently refused to accept this grim, pathetic narrative. I refused to believe that the human brain, the most complex and miraculous structure in the known universe, was simply biologically pre-programmed to disintegrate while the body was still breathing. I could no longer be a passive accomplice to a medical system that treats the brain like an isolated organ locked in a bone vault, completely disconnected from the flesh and blood that feeds it. That blinding frustration drove me away from traditional prescriptions and down a radical, uncharted rabbit hole into functional medicine, nutritional biochemistry, and the cutting-edge science of biological optimization. I was hunting for a lifeline, a way to pull my patients back from the terrifying abyss of dementia. What I unearthed in that journey completely destroyed the foundational dogmas of my medical education. I discovered an earth-shattering truth that has been buried under decades of pharmaceutical propaganda. Cognitive decline, memory loss, and dementia are not your inevitable genetic destiny. They are not random strikes of lightning. They are, in reality, the devastating final climax of a long, silent cascade of metabolic failures and catastrophic lifestyle errors. And here is the most powerful, hope-filled secret that the traditional model refuses to acknowledge. These are physiological errors that you and I have the absolute, undeniable power to intercept, correct, and actually reverse. To understand how to reverse this terrifying cognitive decay, we must first unmask the silent, daily dietary violence we are inflicting upon our own neurons. For years, the medical establishment chased the ghosts of amyloid plaques, treating them as the absolute root cause of Alzheimer's, while completely ignoring the roaring, invisible fire that was actually burning the house down. That fire is chronic metabolic starvation. Your brain is a magnificent, highly demanding, energy-hungry supercomputer, consuming roughly 20% of your body's entire fuel supply, despite making up only 2% of its total physical weight. But what happens when the vital fuel line to that supercomputer is fundamentally compromised? Think of a sprawling, vibrant city where the underground power grid is slowly, block by block, failing. The streetlights flicker, the communication lines go dead, and eventually, whole, beautiful neighborhoods plunge into permanent, irreversible darkness. That city is your brain on a modern Western diet. Through decades of consuming hyper-processed, sugar-laden, industrially manufactured garbage masquerading as real food, we have systematically broken our body's delicate insulin receptors. We constantly hear about insulin resistance in the context of expanding waistlines and type 2 diabetes. But the darkest, most terrifying consequence of this metabolic chaos happens in absolute silence, deep inside your skull. When the delicate neurons in your brain become severely insulin resistant, they lose the biological ability to absorb glucose. They are literally starving to death while floating in a sea of plenty. This is precisely why leading independent neuroscientists are now quietly referring to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes. It is a slow, agonizing suffocation of the mind. I remember staring at Arthur's brain scans, seeing the dark, shrinking voids in his hippocampus, and realizing with a sickening, heavy clarity that his brilliant engineering mind wasn't being destroyed by bad luck or an unavoidable genetic curse. It was suffocating from a lack of cellular energy. The standard government-approved medical advice of eating a balanced diet, heavily anchored in complex carbohydrates and grains, was essentially pouring water into a gas tank and wondering why the engine was violently sputtering and dying. We are unwittingly poisoning our most precious, irreplaceable memories with every single bite of the inflammatory, sugar-coated lies sold to us by a trillion-dollar food industry that heavily profits from our chronic sickness. The tragic cognitive decline that society blindly accepts as a normal, unavoidable part of aging is, in truth, the accumulated, devastating scar tissue of decades of relentless metabolic abuse. Once I realized that these starving brains were simply locked out of their primary fuel source, the mission became blindingly clear. We had to bypass the broken metabolic pathways and provide a radically different kind of biological energy. If glucose could no longer enter the insulin-resistant neurons, we needed an immediate alternative, a biological backdoor to turn the lights back on in that rapidly darkening city before all was lost. This desperate search led me to the profound regenerative power of nutritional ketosis and highly bioavailable fats. We have been thoroughly and tragically brainwashed for half a century to fear dietary fat, terrorized by the myth that it would clog our arteries and stop our hearts. Yet the human brain is composed of nearly 60% pure fat. Stripping our modern diets of healthy, naturally occurring fats and replacing them with highly volatile synthetic seed oils and processed sugary grains was arguably the greatest, most catastrophic nutritional blunder in the history of human health. Recognizing this, I began to design intensive clinical protocols that completely inverted the standard, heavily lobbied food pyramid. We aggressively eradicated the toxic, inflammatory sugars and refined carbohydrates that were causing the neural blockades. In their absolute absence, we flooded the patient's system with rich, neuroprotective fats, medium-chain triglycerides, wild-caught marine omega-3s, avocados, and pasture-raised saturated fats. We were intentionally attempting to force the human liver to produce ketones, a highly efficient, remarkably clean-burning emergency fuel that can easily bypass broken insulin receptors, cross the blood-brain barrier, and feed starving neurons directly. This wasn't merely a diet or a superficial lifestyle tweak. It was a highly targeted, physiological rescue mission. Alongside this profound metabolic shift, we had to aggressively address the chronic, systemic inflammation that was acting like a corrosive battery acid on the delicate neural pathways. We worked to heal the damaged gut microbiome, finally recognizing that the destruction of gut flora from modern antibiotics and chemicals was sending continuous, screaming inflammatory alarms straight up the vagus nerve directly into the brain's control centers. It was a terrifying, exhilarating leap into the clinical unknown, stepping far outside the protective, heavily litigious shield of standard medical protocols. I was no longer writing pointless prescriptions to mask the agonizing, slow-motion fade of human consciousness. I was desperately trying to fundamentally rewire the biological hardware that sustained it. Armed with this new biological blueprint, I brought Arthur back into my clinic, not to offer him another false hope in a plastic pill bottle, but to rebuild his entire neurological foundation from the cellular level up. The first few weeks were a brutal, physically exhausting uphill battle that tested the resolve of everyone involved. Arthur's body, heavily addicted to a lifetime of cheap, rapidly digesting carbohydrates, fought the metabolic transition viciously. His daughter, exhausted from months of caregiving and hovering constantly on the fragile edge of despair, called me almost daily, terrified that we were making a terrible, irreversible mistake. But I fiercely begged them to hold the line, to give the damaged neurons the necessary time to adapt to this new, clean-burning alternative fuel. And then, right around the 6th week of this grueling regimen, the absolute miracle of human biology began to quietly unfold right before our very eyes. It didn't happen in a sudden, dramatic flash like a lightning strike. It was much more akin to the slow, beautiful, and steady clearing of a dense morning fog. It started incredibly simply with a spontaneous joke. Arthur, who had sat in a silent, apathetic, and deeply troubling stupor for months, suddenly made a sharp, incredibly witty observation about a politician speaking on the television in the waiting room. A week later, he casually remembered his youngest grandson's upcoming birthday without being prompted by a calendar or a whisper from his daughter. The terrifying, empty, vacant glaze that had deeply clouded his eyes for the past year began to slowly dissolve, replaced once again by the sharp, piercing, analytical intelligence of the master engineer I had once known. The emotional climax of this biological resurrection occurred on a brisk Tuesday morning when Arthur confidently walked into my clinic, sat down in the examination chair, and, without a single word of hesitation or confusion, reached down and flawlessly tied the laces of his own shoes. When he finally looked up, his daughter was sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. But this time, they were the fierce, violent, overwhelming tears of absolute, unfiltered joy. He wasn't miraculously cured in the sense of a fictional fairy tale. He still had brief moments of mild hesitation, but the precipitous, terrifying plunge into the dark abyss of dementia had been definitively halted. We had literally starved the disease and fed the mind. Watching Arthur bravely reclaim his stolen dignity, watching him proudly step back into his rightful role as the patriarch of his family, permanently shattered every cynical, defeatist belief I had ever been taught in conventional medical school. Arthur's miraculous return from the heavy shadows of dementia is not a statistical anomaly. It is a profound, undeniable testament to the brain's astonishing capacity to heal when we finally stop aggressively poisoning it. This is the empowering, revolutionary truth that the conventional medical paradigm is utterly terrified of you discovering. The absolute power to save your mind does not reside in a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical laboratory, and it never will. It resides right now in your kitchen, in your daily habits, and in the fundamental molecular choices you make every single time you put a fork to your mouth. You do not have to be a helpless, terrified victim, sitting in a sterile room waiting passively for a genetic time bomb to detonate in your golden years. You are the ultimate active architect of your own cognitive destiny. If you are currently noticing the terrifying, creeping early signs of brain fog, if you are struggling more and more to pull a familiar, everyday word from the tip of your tongue, or if you are agonizingly watching someone you deeply, fiercely love slip away into the silent shadows of their own mind, you must take radical action right now. The biological window for meaningful intervention is wide open, but I promise you, it will not stay open forever. Throw out the highly processed, inflammatory seed oils that are suffocating your cells. Ruthlessly eliminate the refined, toxic sugars that are starving your neurons, and start richly nourishing your brain with the healthy, vital fats it desperately craves to rebuild its failing, fragile infrastructure. You must demand so much more from your healthcare providers. Boldly refuse the easy, deeply apathetic diagnosis of inevitable decline, and step bravely into the radical, healing light of biological optimization. The fight for your precious memory, for your unique identity, and for the beautiful, irreplaceable, divine essence of exactly who you are begins at this very moment. Do not surrender your mind to the darkness without unleashing a ferocious fight. Reclaim your fundamental biological birthright and rewrite the ending to your own beautiful story today. In essence, the alarming rise of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease is not merely a tragedy of aging or bad genetics, but rather a direct, devastating consequence of our modern dietary choices. For decades, we have unwittingly starved our brain's intricate neural networks by flooding our bodies with highly processed, sugary, and carbohydrate-heavy foods, leading to severe cellular insulin resistance, a condition increasingly recognized by neuroscientists as type 3 diabetes. When the brain can no longer absorb glucose, it literally suffocates from a lack of energy. However, the profound revelation within this medical darkness is that this terrifying decay can often be halted and even reversed. By completely overhauling our diet to eliminate toxic sugars and synthetic seed oils and aggressively introducing highly bioavailable neuroprotective fats, we can force the liver to produce ketones. This clean-burning, alternative emergency fuel effortlessly bypasses broken metabolic pathways to nourish starving neurons directly. Arthur's miraculous transformation from the dark abyss of dementia back to a sharp, fully present individual is a testament to the brain's incredible capacity to heal when given the proper biological environment. The ultimate takeaway is one of immense empowerment. Your cognitive destiny is not locked away in a pharmaceutical laboratory, but rests squarely on your dinner plate. You possess the absolute power to protect your memories, your unique identity, and your mind by making radical, deliberate choices about the molecular building blocks you consume every single day. Food is not merely empty calories. It is the fundamental biological information that dictates the survival or destruction of your neural hardware. The tragic deterioration of the human mind is largely a preventable metabolic crisis, and you are the active architect of your own cognitive longevity. Start treating your kitchen as your primary healthcare clinic. Take immediate, radical action by auditing your pantry today. Throw out the industrial seed oils, highly refined carbohydrates, and inflammatory sugars. Begin richly nourishing your body with high-quality, brain-building fats like avocados, wild-caught marine omega-3s, and pasture-raised eggs. Do not wait for a devastating medical diagnosis to change your habits. Treat every single meal as a deliberate, protective investment in your future cognitive independence and your most precious memories. What is one specific sugary or highly processed food that you are willing to cut from your diet today to protect your brain health? Please share your thoughts and commitments in the comments section below so we can all learn and draw inspiration from each other's journeys. If you found this information valuable, please hit the subscribe button to support the channel. Your support gives us the motivation to continue researching and creating high-quality, life-changing content for you.